How's it going, everyone? I am Dylan, this is All You Can Board, and this is Storm, which is our Marvel Champions Hero review for the day. There are still some other ones I need to get through, some other content I haven't put out there yet, but there's just so much content coming out on the same day now, which makes it extra difficult to kind of get through it all. It was one thing when it was like spaced out, we got like one pack a month or an expansion a month because I had that time to dedicate to it. But when there's multiple things coming out and we're doing our regular board game content as well, it's a lot. So I will get to it. It's just gonna take me some time. But we're talking about Storm today. So we covered Wolverine. Storm came out the same day. Storm's a very different hero than Wolverine, but I did play them both through the Mojo Mania scenario together. It was fun to play them together. I did one game of Storm solo as well, just to kind of understand, you know, if there's any differences. We're gonna jump into all the cards, and I'm gonna tell you what my thoughts are on them. So we're gonna start, of course, where we always do, which is with the Alter Ego. All right, so Ororo Munroe has 3 recovery and says that she begins the game with a weather deck. So that is Storm's unique aspect, is in the same kind of vein as we've seen with Doctor Strange and his separate deck. We have a weather deck, and not that I'm saying it's the same deck, but just kind of the same mechanic. We're gonna have a separate deck, which is the weather deck, and you're gonna be manipulating and bringing out cards from that deck, and they're gonna be affecting the battlefield in different ways. So you start with that deck in play, which is 4 cards, and there's also the ability, I Feel a Storm Coming, which is during setup, choose a support from the weather deck and put it into play. So you get to choose which of these 4 weather environments is gonna start in play, depending on what you're wanting to accomplish that game. The villain you're playing against, you know, you'll kind of gravitate towards different weather environments depending on the scenario, but you can choose which one of the 4 you're gonna start with. The other 3 will remain in the deck. Other than that, hand size is 6, hit points of 10. Let's flip over to the hero side, which is of course Storm. We have a 1-2-1 stat line, which is you know, a slight bet on the weaker side. Weather control here, action, swap your weather support in play with the support of your choice from the weather deck. Resolve the special ability on your weather support in play. So it's a key to note here that you're not activating the ability of the weather support that's currently in play. The one that is going to come into play is the one that's having its ability triggered. So you kind of have to keep that in mind, because a lot of Storms managing, you know, when to bring certain Storm effects in, which one to kind of end your turn with in play, and you know, allow that ongoing effect to take effect, but then the special's not going to trigger anymore in your next turn when it leaves. So you're managing a lot of that. Just, it's a you know, important thing to keep in mind, the way it kind of all structures there. Hand size goes down to 5, but that's about it. So again, everything to do with Storm is with this weather deck coming into play. So let's jump into the weather deck and you'll better understand everything I just explained here. The first one we're going to look at is Clear Skies. So Clear Skies, these are all permanents that stay in play. It says each character gains Stalwart, obviously very good. The special here is draw 1 card. So every single time you're able to trigger that, which there are multiple ways you can, you're going to draw a card. This is one of the better specials. I mean, they're all good. They're all beneficial, but the fact that like drawing 1 card is just always good, in the sense you get a resource that you can generate from it to pay for extra things, or you might draw into something that changes your strategy, allows you more flexibility. Drawing cards is great, and the fact that you can trigger it all the time with Clear Skies, or not all the time, but whenever you have the special trigger, is really good. Next one is Hurricane. Each character gains Retaliate 1. Special is remove 2 threat from a scheme. So this is your threat removal one. This is the one you're going to gravitate towards if you are specifically trying to manage threat that, you know, is either getting under control, or you just want to keep it under control for a longer period of time, whatever, especially if you have multiple ways to trigger it. Hurricane's the way you're going to go. Thunderstorm, each character gets +1 attack. Special, deal 2 damage to an enemy. This is your damage one, matches with the Thunderstorm. It's the one that I tended to use the most, but that's just my play style. Or I should say the drawing the card one I used a lot too, but in general, I gravitated towards Thunderstorm just because I often go on the offensive when I'm playing Marvel Champions. That's the way I usually like to play, even when I'm playing aspects that aren't known for that. I just like the ability to deal damage, and it's obviously important in solo play because you have to be dealing damage. So Thunderstorm is one I relied on a lot, really good. Last one is Blizzard. Each character gets -1 attack. The ability here is choose a non-elite minion until the end of the round. Treat that minion's text box as if it were blank. This is the most situational of all of them, but if that situation arises, the fact that you can basically eliminate the text box of a minion, a non-elite one, can be really good if you have a minion in play that's otherwise going to cause you a lot of grief, especially as you go over to the villain phase. So more situational. I use Blizzard by far the least out of all of them, but it's nice to be able to have that to fall back on and be able to pull from the deck if you absolutely need it. Okay, let's get into some of Storm's cards. The first one is Storm's Crown. This is part of her kit. 2-cost upgrade. Storm gets +1 thwart, so you can boost some of her, weaker base stats. Hero resource, exhaust Storm's Crown to generate the printed resource on your weather support. So this is going to be the weather support that is already currently in play. All of them have a resource in the bottom left, obviously, and you're going to be able to generate that resource. So essentially, this is like we've seen a card like this in many heroes before. It boosts one of your base stats by 1, and it generates a resource. It's nothing new in that regard. Just keep in mind that you're generating the resource that is specifically on your weather event. So in that sense, Clear Skies is the one that has the wild resource. That's going to always be the best one because it gives you the most flexibility. But otherwise, if you're looking for a specific resource, keep in mind which one you have in play. Next up, Storm's Cape, 3-cost upgrade. Storm gets +1 defense and gains the aerial trait. So if you're a huge aerial fan and you like trying to build really wild aerial decks with heroes that have aerial, Storm can have aerial. You have to have this card, obviously. Hero response, after you resolve the special ability on your weather support, exhaust this to ready Storm. I use this a lot. This is a really important card because, again, you're wanting to not only chain weather support cards at the right time to get their benefit, but there's other things like with Storm's Cape that the timing of them and the order that you do them in are going to allow you to do more. If you're able to ready Storm and do more stuff with her, you want to make sure you've already exhausted her before you go into using Storm's Cape. That trigger, I should say, it's just another thing to keep in mind because you have to trigger the special ability on your weather card before you can exhaust this to ready Storm. So it's this chain event that we've seen heroes like this before that you have sort of this other, I don't want to call it a mini game because I've called it that before in other situations, but it's essentially this other thing you have to manage of not only do I want to use this ability, what order do I do everything in to maximize my turn, to make sure that I get the full value out of everything I have on my board. That's a little bit of a cool puzzle to solve when you're playing Storm, is how can I be most efficient? And when you're not, then you think next time, okay, I learned from that, how do I do it better next time? So it's a neat little puzzle you're going to be solving. Stormscape's a big part of that, especially if you get it early. You're hoping you draw this early because getting that into play, in the first couple turns is going to set you up for success for the rest of the game. All right, Ororo's Garden is our alter ego support. This is a 1-cost support that says alter ego action, exhaust Ororo's Garden, heal 2 damage from your identity. So this is a straight heal 2, always available when you're an alter ego. You just have to exhaust this. Nothing overly fancy. We've seen much more interesting alter ego supports. In that sense, maybe a little bit disappointing, but having a consistent heal, it's not that it's not good. It's just, we've seen stuff like this before. It would have been neat to see something a little bit more, fresh, but being able to heal for 4 just by, flipping to alter ego and then using it again before you flip back, really, really good. And having that extra recovery on top of your 3 means you're recovering for 7 every time you go. Great for playing solo and having this fallback option to always sort of replenish your health before you jump back into the fray. Weather Goddess, a 0-cost event. Hero action, swap your weather support in play with a support of your choice from the weather deck. Resolve the special ability on your weather support in play. So you're gonna resolve the special on the new weather event that's coming into play, but you have to choose which one you want, and this is a free swap of it. So instead of having to swap the normal way, you have this other option essentially to be able to do it. There's 3 copies, I should have mentioned, in your deck. So you're gonna see this card often, and this is one of the ways you're gonna be cycling through weather events, perhaps even multiple times in a turn, to end on the one you specifically want. That's a big part of this, is always make sure that you kind of finish off your combo with the one you want to leave in play as you head to the villain phase and for, maybe the next player's phase you're playing multiplayer. So getting that order right, but this is going to facilitate that and allow you to sort of flip-flop that around multiple times and end where you want. Okay, Torrential Rain. This is a series of cards that are, specifically affected by a specific weather event being in play. So Torrential Rain is your threat one, 2-cost event, remove 3 threat from among schemes in play. If Hurricane is in play, resolve its special ability. So the fact that it's from among schemes in play is better than just a straight 3 threat removal for 2, because you can split that up. That flexibility is huge. It's never a downside to have flexibility. It's always an upside. Really, really good. And you get to resolve the special ability of your Hurricane for extra threat removal. So there's 3 copies that you specifically want to do this. Obviously, when a Hurricane's in play, it's not the worst if it's not in play. Like, I think there was one instance where I used it just for the straight 3 threat removal because I specifically needed a threat removal card, and that's what I had. It didn't matter to me that Hurricane wasn't in play, but you always want to try to time that with Hurricane. You just get way more value, and then it feels like you're removing 5 threat instead of 3 for that 2 cost. All right, Lightning Bolt. This is the attack one, so this is one of my favorite cards, obviously, and the hero cards, if you know what I gravitate towards. 3-cost event, deal 8 damage to an enemy. If Thunderstorm is in play, resolve its special ability, which is, of course, 2 more damage, which means you'd be doing 10 damage total for this 3 cost just because you timed it right with Thunderstorm in play. Obviously really good. I mean, 8 damage for 3 is already going to be a reliably solid card that you're going to use a lot. You have 2 copies of them. The fact that you can up that to 10 just by having the right weather event to play gives you extra, incentive to make sure you're managing your weather events properly. And then we've got Flash Freeze, 1-cost event, 2 copies of this. Hero Interrupt, when the villain attacks you, the villain and each minion engaged with you gets a -3 attack while attacking you this phase. If Blizzard is in play, resolve its special ability. Again, the special ability will blank the minion's text box. This is really, really good. I use this a bunch. It might have been the one that I initially looking at this pack was, that flew under my radar just a little bit because, again, I gravitate towards the bigger attack cards and I think about the threat removal I'm going to need. But the fact that this one is, when the villain attacks you, not only the villain, but each minion engaged with you as well as gain that -3 attack, you can essentially, aside from boost icons in some cases, you can essentially negate the damage that's coming your way for 1. That is really, really solid card. There's 2 of them. You're going to see it a lot. You don't even really need to trigger the extra ability here with Blizzard being in play for this to be valuable, whereas the other one, I mean, you don't have to with the other ones as well, except for maybe Torrential Rain, but this one specifically just feels like I would constantly play this without triggering that Blizzard ability because it still feels really good for that 1 cost. So really, really solid card. I think you'll probably use Flash Freeze a bunch. And then we've got, lastly, Blast of Wind. 3-cost event, choose a player, deal 3 damage to the villain and each minion engaged with that player, resolve the special ability of your weather support. So this one is, it doesn't matter which one is in play, you're resolving the special ability of whatever weather event's in play. You get a free resolve of it, and this is sort of like a bit of a, not a board clear, but like an AoE type effect, because you're dealing 3 damage not only to the villain, but every minion engaged with the player you chose. It doesn't even have to be you. It could be the player you're playing with, whatever the case is. You're going to sort of clear their, I mean, you're not definitely going to clear their board, but 3 damage can pick off a lot of small pesky minions. I always use Ultron as the example. If you're playing Ultron, this is essentially a board wipe for that player of all the minions engaged with them, and you get a free trigger of the special ability. Solid card, but again, a bit situational depending on if there are enough minions for that 3 cost to feel worth it. You're going to need at least a couple with some nasty abilities or whatever to make you want to pay 3 resources to essentially pull that off. Otherwise, the 3 damage to the villain for 3 is obviously not the trade-off you're looking for there. But either way, a really solid card. Okay, we've got 4 new leadership allies here to go through because this is a leadership pre-built deck, and obviously leadership is very ally-heavy archetype. So first one we're going to talk about is Havok. This is a 4-cost ally, a little bit more expensive, 1 thwart, 2 attack, no consequential damage on the 2 attack, so keep that in mind. 3 health, but the forced interrupt is when Havok attacks, discard the top card of the encounter deck. For each boost icon discarded this way, Havok gets +1 attack for this attack and takes +1 consequential damage. So the consequential damage is non-existent normally, but it's going to scale with the attack you're getting from the boost icons. So this is an interesting card. Like it's a neat one to sort of consider and deck build around and play. My personal play style of I guess card games in general, but Marvel Champions specifically we're talking about is I'm not often gravitating towards things that fluctuate a lot in their effectiveness. And what I mean by that is like drawing for the boost icons is unpredictable. You don't know if you're going to draw into something that has 3 boost icons or 0 boost icons. And not that this is like the worst if it has 0 boost icons, because then you're also not taking consequential damage, but you're never going to, I shouldn't say you're never, but it's not often going to be that exactly what you want to happen is going to happen with something that's this random. You're going to sort of be crossing your fingers and hoping, flipping and seeing what happens. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just something you always have to account for, and you have to know that you could have a situation turn south on you for no wrongdoing of your own, just really bad luck of the draw. I don't often deck build with those kind of cards, and especially for a 4-cost ally, I don't know how often I gravitate towards it, but the fact that this has no consequential damage inherently on that attack does, warrant revisiting it and experimenting with this card, and I probably will at some point in the future. All right, next up is Mirage. Is a 3-cost ally, 2 health, 2 thwart, 1 attack. This one does have a consequential damage on each of the attack and the thwart. The response is, after Mirage enters play, choose an enemy whose scheme is less than Mirage's thwart, which is 2, stun that enemy. So again, this is the scheme you're looking at. There are lots of minions in the game, and even villains that have low scheme that would have less than two thwart, or have less than 2 scheme because she has 2 thwart. So if you are entering a villain scenario where one of the phases or both of the phases of the villain have less than 2 scheme, this is such a powerful card to include because you're getting a free stun while playing a 3-cost ally, which is not too steep of a cost. To get a stun on that, also have a blocker, also have the 2 thwart that you can use once here. Like, there's enough value there that I think you're gonna find a lot of use out of Mirage, or minions that are really nasty but just have low scheme that you're able to take advantage of as well. But I think you have to really analyze the scenario you're going into first. Look at the minions that are in the deck, look at the villain, look at the stats, and say, how effective is Mirage going to be, and how often is she going to be effective? Because if that probability is too low, probably not going to want to include Mirage in the deck. But either way, really cool card. I'm interested to kind of get in there and try out Mirage and see if there's any other ways I can manipulate her thwart while it's in my hand or something. I can't remember all the cards now that have popped up in Marvel Champs because there's so many, it's hard to keep track. But I'd be interested to go back and see, is there any way I can boost Mirage's thwart so that I even get more value out of this, because I can target enemies that otherwise normally I wouldn't be able to target with that interplay ability. Either way, cool card. All right, next up is Gentle. I did not know Gentle was a character. 3 cost, 3 health, 1 thwart, 3 attack, 1 consequential damage on that 3 attack as well. But as you'll see, Gentle takes +1 consequential damage after he attacks the villain. So that 1 consequential damage for 3 damage you're dealing, which would have been insane value or not insane, but good value for a 3-cost ally with 3 health, is only if you're attacking minions. As soon as you attack the villain, you are going to take 2 consequential damage, which is going to limit what Gentle can do here. But having that flexibility to do 9 damage for this 3 cost across 3 different minions, or 6 damage and also block, like this is a decent ally with some potential. Nothing game breaking, but you can still attack the villain in a pinch if you need. You're just taking that extra 2 consequential damage. So you have that flexibility to, kind of reduce the power level to, I guess, what would normally be the standard for stats like that with a cost like that. Or you have the flexibility to get this extra value if you're targeting minions. Cool card, nothing super flashy, but interesting nonetheless, and a cool inclusion in the deck. Lastly, we have Pixie, which is the 2-cost ally. 2 health, 1 thwart, 2 attack, but we have 2 consequential damage. I can't say consequential today. Maybe I'm talking too fast. 2 consequential damage on the attack. Response is, after you play Pixie from your hand, add an X-Men ally from your discard pile to your hand. This is my favorite one of the 4 allies by far. I think it's the most powerful one. Not only is it a 2-cost ally, which are normally, again, we've talked about this before, some of the more powerful allies in the game, because you also get this cheap blocker, which protects you from whatever the villain's going to do. This one's also getting you an X-Men ally from your discard pile back to your hand. So an ally that is gone, or you didn't use, or used as a resource, or whatever, was discarded in some way, you're now getting back to your hand. You're essentially drawing a card, and you're able to target specific allies in your discard pile. You're drawing from your discard pile. It's not quite as good as a regular card draw, but it's close, and you're getting decent stats on Pixie as well as the ability to do a swing of 2 if you really needed to, even though that would kill Pixie on her base health. But regardless, lots of cool flexibility here. I like this card a lot, and I think it'll be one that I think we see across a lot of leadership X-Men builds as that sort of 2-cost ally chump blocker that has some effectiveness with its ability as well. Really neat card. All right, Uncanny X-Men. So Uncanny X-Men is a 3-cost support. Play under any player's control, max 1 team card per player. This does have the team keyword. Each of your X-Men allies gets +1 hit point. If each of your characters has the X-Men trait, each of your X-Men allies costs 1 fewer resource to play. Really, really powerful card, and this should probably end up being a staple across the ally-focused leadership X-Men builds, because it is just really good. It just seems like one of those cornerstones. The fact that you're reducing the resource cost of your X-Men allies, and the fact that they're all getting +1 hit point, is really powering up your board. Again, if you only have 1 ally in play, or you only have like 1 ally you're playing, sure, probably not worth it, and probably not worth you paying the 3 costs to get this into play, or to use this. But having that hit point, and having that reduction of cost across multiple cards, across multiple allies is really, really good. So really neat card. One of those cards that just really powers up a leadership build. Again, I think it's just going to be a really strong inclusion. Any leadership build that you're doing that is X-Men focused, that has allies as a primary component in them. Leadership skill. We've seen a lot of these skill cards. This is the leadership one. 3 uses, max 1 per player. When an ally makes a basic thwart or a basic attack action, remove one of the counters here, and that ally gets +1 thwart and +1 attack for that action. Pretty simple card, just a way to power up your allies with their thwart and their attack. That's really solid. It only costs 1. It's going to be really easy to get out. But again, it's going to just depend on what you have in play and what that power up is going to do, whether or not it's worth it even for the 1 cost. But I think because of its really cheap cost and the fact that, powering up allies can be a very, very strong thing in this game, I think this is going to see a decent amount of play, especially obviously in those leadership builds. Then we've got To Me, My X-Men, a 1-cost event. Play only if your identity has the X-Men trait. This is very much an X-Men card. Search the top 5 cards of your deck for an X-Men ally. Put it into play. If that ally is still in play at the end of the phase, add it to your hand. I love this card. It is really cheap. When you miss and you don't hit an ally in the top 5, it still sucks, but it doesn't suck nearly as much when you only paid 1 resource for it. You don't feel like you've foregone your whole turn just by taking a risk. So I like that. If you hit, it is so sweet to get an ally directly into play that you can utilize this turn, and sometimes more than just like a swing for an attack or a thwart, depending on what the ability is on the card. So you get to utilize it rather than it being discarded Nick Fury style to the discard pile. You get it back to your hand, so now you can play it again if it's something you want to have in play, or if you feel like you already got the use out of it just from that one time, you go to the discard pile by using it as a resource. Really solid card. I used this a whole bunch. It was always effective. It always felt satisfying. And again, the couple times that I missed and I didn't have an ally in the top 5, didn't feel like the end of the world. Still frustrating, but for only 1 cost, it didn't break my turn or really screw up my game. Then we've got the single new basic card. The other basic cards we have already seen in other packs. This is Forge. It is an ally, a 2-cost one at that. 2-cost ally, 2 health, 1 thwart, 1 attack. Response: after Forge enters play, search your deck and discard pile for an X-Men or X-Force support and add it to your hand. Shuffle. Just a solid basic card because it facilitates things across multiple X-Men builds and X-Force cards as well. Being able to grab a support card, especially if you deck built your deck in a specific way that like this is going to tutor out a specific card or it's part of a combo, whatever. This facilitates a lot and it's basic, so we're going to see it across multiple decks. Really need ally inclusion as the basic ally in this pack. Then of course we've got the obligation, which is Claustrophobia. Flip to alter ego form. You cannot change forms. This is not a request. It's not saying you may flip to alter ego form. It's saying you flip to alter ego form and you cannot change back. Alter ego action: exhaust Ororo Munroe to remove this from the game. Super straightforward. It's just interesting to note, that's why I called it out, is that you don't have the option. You have to flip to alter ego if you're not there. You have to exhaust your character to be able to get rid of this. Otherwise, you're never flipping back to hero form because it specifically says you cannot change forms. Really nasty, I shouldn't say really nasty, but really annoying obligation that you're going to have no choice but to indulge in and get rid of. All right, Nemesis minion. This is Callisto, I believe that's how you pronounce it. 1 scheme, 3 attack, 5 health, quick strike, force interrupt. When a knife fight treachery is revealed, give Callisto a tough status card. So that's obviously the treachery card we're going to get to, which there's 2 copies of. If any of those are revealed, which is a neat interaction, Callisto gets a tough status card. I like that interaction. I like when we see cards that are part of a Nemesis that work in conjunction with each other, whether it's the side scheme in the Nemesis or in this case the treachery. Really, really neat. Overall, it's really the 3 attack that's the nastiest part of this because 3 damage, hitting you multiple times potentially, especially with the quick strike there, is going to get annoying really fast. You're going to want to get rid of Callisto, and if it's going to be harder to get rid of her because tough status cards are getting added on, you might be taking more damage than you like. So not the nastiest one we've seen, but it's one that's going to give you a bit of a headache when it hits play. Leader of the Morlocks. I don't know what a Morlock is. I'm not familiar with the X-Men comics as much, but Callisto, I'm assuming, is the leader of them. This says, when defeated, the player who defeated this scheme searches the encounter deck and discard pile and set aside area for knife fight and reveals it. So we talked about the cards working in conjunction with each other. We have Callisto, which interacts with Knife Fight, and then we have Leader of the Morlocks, which grabs you a Knife Fight, which is going to trigger the tough status card in Callisto. So I love it. I love the interaction. I love that they all work together. It just makes it just feel, it just works better. They have the thematics and everything about it is just so much cooler when all your cards kind of work together, and when the villain feels like they're comboing against you, it's just extra nasty. Switchblade. So Switchblade says, gives Callisto, or whoever it's attached to, I should say, +2 attack. Attach the minion with the highest printed attack, which Callisto has 3. That will often be Callisto. Otherwise, this card gains Surge. Attached minions' attacks gain Piercing. So the Piercing is one thing, but the +2 attack is another. Bringing Callisto up to 5 attack is obviously really, really nasty. And like I said, there is a good chance that he is going to attach to Callisto. All right, and 2 copies of Knife Fight. So when revealed in Alter Ego, nothing happens. It just gains Surge. But when it's revealed in hero form, choose an enemy with the highest attack, take damage equal to its attack, deal damage to that enemy equal to your attack. Really interesting card in that, you might sometimes want Knife Fight to come out. All this talk about all these comboing and like one card triggering to another. You could be in a situation where you're fine taking the 3 damage if it means you get to deal your attack back and potentially kill Callisto. So an interesting interaction. I really, really like this Nemesis set in general. I think there's a lot of cool interactions with the cards themselves, but also just unique card text on them. So it's a fun one to play with, but again, it all comes down to how much that combos. And in all the games I played with Storm, I think I only had Shadows of the Past come on and trigger these cards once, and I didn't get that full like combo interaction between all the cards where it's like this trigger into this, because I just didn't have the time for that to come out. The game ended before it. But that having that interaction, that potential for it is going to make your games a little bit more interesting. Okay, the other cards that are included in the deck. So we got 3 copies of a protection card, and then we have a new modular encounter set. So the protection card is called Hangar Bay. This is a 1-cost support that says max 1 per player. Response: after an ally defends against an attack and is not defeated, exhaust this card, ready that ally. Really cool card. Protection's all about using, much like leadership in that way, using your allies to protect, and you want your protection allies to hopefully be able to take a hit and survive. That's a big thing with a lot of protection allies that are in the game, and ways that you're powering them up to sort of stop as many hits as you can, so you never even really have to defend with your hero, and that way your hero's available. That's sort of a last resort sometimes. This card supports those kind of builds, which I love. I love that they revisit old builds and other, cards that were already in the game that, allies that might have had tough status cards, whatever, that you can now use with Hangar Bay and be able to kind of take advantage of that extra ready. Really neat card, neat inclusion in this pack. The modular encounter set is Shadow King, and the first card we're going to look at is the Shadow King. So this is a 3-scheme, 3-attack minion with 6 health. It is elite. While a controlled minion is in play, the Shadow King cannot take damage. When revealed, search the encounter deck and discard pile for a copy of the Possessed attachment and reveal it. So to understand a controlled minion, we are going to look at Possessed first, and there's 2 copies of it that you could be grabbing. Possessed says, it's an attachment, treat attached ally as a controlled minion with a blank text box. Attached minion's scheme is equal to its thwart, and it does not take consequential damage. When revealed, attach to the ally with the lowest thwart without Possessed attached. If you cannot, this card gains Surge. All of that is just the rules of how it attaches, but essentially this is taking control of an ally and turning them into a minion. Really nasty, because not only do you have to defeat this new minion in play, so it's bringing in a minion to play, you've lost an ally at the same time, and you're essentially having to kill your own ally. That's really, really nasty, and on top of that, the fact that Shadow King says when one of these controlled minions is in play, you cannot deal damage to the Shadow King, that really sucks too. And again, it's another example of cards working in conjunction with each other, but really, really cool encounter set because of the way those cards work together. I just think it's really nasty, it's really tough, and it's something you can include if you want to sort of up the difficulty and counter yourself for playing an ally build to say, okay, I'm having an easy time with all these allies. Let's throw the Shadow King in so that they can take control of my allies and make things a little bit harder for me, even the playing field a little bit. Ruler of the Astral Plane. This is a side scheme with 6 threat on it to start. When defeated, discard 1 copy of Possessed from play. This has a acceleration token. Boost: if you are engaged with a controlled minion, reveal this card. Really neat interaction in that you get to discard the copy of Possessed in play and bring them back, from that being that state of being controlled. this becomes this extra little side quest that you have to go on, and you say, how much do I want my minion back? Am I going to focus my attention on removing this threat to be able to do that, or am I just going to kill off my minion because that's not worth my time? Either way, really neat inclusion. Again, works with everything else in the encounter set. Last one is Astral Attack. Treachery. When revealed, each controlled minion activates against you. If there are no controlled minions in play, this gains Surge. The boost is shuffle each Shadow King card from the discard pile into the encounter deck. The boost is almost the worst part of that, because you could have discarded a lot of those Shadow King cards in other ways, never even really revealed them and brought them out. And now this card comes along with a boost and brings them all back into play. I honestly think the boost is the worst part of that card, but it is a really interesting card either way. That is the Storm pack. What do I think of Storm? I think that Storm does a lot of really interesting things in that it's always interesting to have to sort of look at what you're wanting to accomplish that turn, look at what you want to play, and think, not only do I have to decide what to play, I have to decide what order to play it in, what order to trigger something in. If I do this, that's going to make this weather event leave play, which is going to bring in a new one and trigger that special ability. Is that the special ability I want to trigger? If I don't want to end my turn with that weather event in play, which one do I want to end with, and how am I going to do this order so I end with that one in play? Can I trigger something with Storm's Cape to ready Storm and get more value? There's so much you're considering that, as cool as and interesting as that is, it's not the playstyle that I necessarily gravitate towards in Marvel Champions, because I find myself not in a state of analysis paralysis, but just doing a lot of thinking and staring at the table and thinking, okay, order before I commit to an order. And then sometimes you realize you just did one thing wrong about the order, and you execute, you're like, oh shoot, actually I want to do this first. And you have to ask yourself, okay, well, I'm going to just keep forging ahead, or am I going to mulligan and do what I did just because I thought of it wrong or whatever? It just, that playstyle isn't quite the one that I love the most in Marvel Champions. I still had a lot of fun with Storm, especially when I was playing Storm in conjunction with Wolverine. I think that I had less fun when I played Storm solo. That was me personally. But with Wolverine and having that balance between what they both do and having the Storm environments affect, what I was doing with Wolverine as well, was really, really cool. To me, Storm is a much more effective and fun multiplayer hero than she was solo. I'm not saying she's not an effective solo hero or that she can't be, but I just didn't find her as fun as a solo hero. So that was my experience. But either way, really cool addition to the game. That is Storm. Let me know in the comments, as always, what you thought of Storm, and specifically out of Storm and Wolverine, which one you find yourself gravitating towards more than the other, which one you prefer, if there's one you don't like. Let me know in the comments. I'm always interested to hear from you guys. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. There will be more Marvel Champions content coming. There's other packs I obviously want to cover. There is a new hero that was just announced at the time I'm recording this today that I obviously want to cover as well. There's just a lot to get through, but keep your eyes peeled on the channel and it will eventually be there. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.